What's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and the adorable one. Have a little dose of adorable right there. Get your morning cup of adorable. That's right. The little peachy one. Yes, the Astro Weather cat. Yes. You could be here forever, couldn't you? What's happening, everybody? We are back for another edition of the Astro Weather, and welcome. Welcome to the proceedings. We have a lot to talk about today. Lot to talk about today. Let's see. Let me get my graphics lined up here. And there we go. All right. So I hope everybody is having a absolutely wonderful day wherever you are. And that you are experiencing epiphany after epiphany after epiphany. Boy, I tell you, it got real hot yesterday over there in Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C. Now, what was interesting, we're going to bring this back into the astrological discussion here, is that we were looking at that Sun-Saturn conjunction. And man, did it get played out, and especially with the square to Jupiter over what spending and budgets, right? Wow, the whole Trump Thomas Massey dust up wasn't just about Trump and Thomas Massey. It was about factions. It was about people that are aligned with particular ideologies, and this is a major. This is kind of a major piece and a very significant rift in terms of the American public and who believes in what and why. I'm not going to get into the bulk mechanics of it here. We're going to do that over on 15, but from the astrological perspective, we'll definitely get into it and why we're still in it, albeit with a bit of a different sort of focus. Yesterday was pure Saturn, right? Yesterday was pure Saturn. Whatever you believe in the symbolic interpretation of Saturn, right? It was like Saturn as principle, and there was this kind of overwhelming sort of position on one side. It's the Trump side, which is Massey's a grandstander, and you just have to trust Trump. He's got a plan, and we need more time for the plan, which means they need to have the government open and running so that Trump can continue to do what he's doing and do more. And that is asking the American people to co-sign on a plan that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this here, but on a plan where we are supposed to trust that whatever is going to happen will be for the greater good, will be for the cause, right? And so far, just keeping score at home, the Trump administration has promised to deliver the JFK files. Well, we still haven't seen them. They're hanging out somewhere in Anna Luna's office. And then also there's the Epstein files that we were promised a week ago. And where are they? So what I'm trying to communicate here is that, okay, you want us to trust the plan. Well, execute on the plan that you've already put into motion and have told people that we're going to be the most transparent presidency in the history of this country. Okay, well, deliver. See, this is the important part in any relationship. whether it's with the President of the United States. And here we go. We're talking about Venus retrograde now, right? In any relationship, if there is a track record of trust and consistency, then you can continue to invest in the relationship. It's an ongoing, organic, living entity. It's not something that's static and based on whatever agreement, two parties had at one particular time, right? It's something that's living and organic and needs to be continually updated. And if that's not happening, then the contract, the relationship, and the agreement needs to be, I don't know, reevaluated. So this is a really big part of this Venus retrograde, because what we saw, if you look at Venus and Aries just as two entities, right? Venus is about negotiation, generally speaking, right? And Venus represents harmony and beauty. It's more feminine. It yields versus Mars's yang, which doesn't yield. It's like the yin and the yang. Mars is much more, shove it down your throat. This is the direction. This is where we're going. You're either on the bus or off the bus. You're either, with us or not with us. I mean, that's the nature of these two things, right? So we have Venus and Aries, which is negotiating with power, right? There are certain astrological signs that are connected to power more than others. Ostensible, visceral power. Aries happens to be one of them. Scorpio is another. Capricorn is another, and I would throw Leo in there. Those, to me, those are the four power signs. That doesn't mean other signs can't be powerful. That's a subjective sort of discussion, and we can sit here and go through the power of each sign and find an inherent power. But the idea of power in a raw and unmitigated form is really going to be those four signs. And in those four signs, you will see the application of Mars as being incredibly powerful. Mars in Capricorn, that's exalted. Right? Mars in Capricorn is exalted. Mars in Cancer is in its fall, right? You have Mars in Aries in rulership. Mars in Scorpio, incredibly powerful. So this is how we define powers, through those signs. And even Mars and Leo, especially as it relates to Trump's chart, will represent a type of power. So when we have Venus retrograde, we are re-examining our relationship with power. Who has it? Who doesn't have it? Who wants it? Who's in the way of it? This is all a big part of what's happening right now. And it's part of the Venus retrograde. So we'll talk about that. We'll continue to kind of excavate that when it comes to the astrology, and of course there's more. So let's see who's here today. All right, we got the California Contrarian checking in at 11:41, just sneaking in under the wire for our guy Michael Cisternino. Matt C checking in at 12:34. The Great One at 4:55. The Great One witnessed the green triangle again at 5:56 a.m. Okay, you got me curious. I'm up tomorrow. I have to write a note. Get up for the green triangle. Jackie Delario is in Medford Lakes today. That's in New Jersey, by the way. Diane Evans checking in. Hey, Diane. Hammer time. Lena Winkler, Susan, Healing Heart Rosie, Queen Lisa checking in from sunny northern Florida. Nunya Beeswax. 512 in the house. There's our guy Sigurd. The trickster demon ferret intensifies. Who are we talking about? Is that Keir Starmer? We need a personification here. There's a lot of trickster demon ferrets out there these days. Janice Phillips, The Goat Lady. She's with us, Soul Traveler. Janine. Hi, Janine. I need more coffee. Been doing writing early in the mornings. Good for you. Good for you, Janice. Excellent. We're going to get into one of the. We're going to get into one of the great writers of American literature today and the star of the day. We'll talk about writing. Big Dave Sullivan, Green Eyed Crow. There's our guy, Ryan. What's happening, Ryan? Yes, come on over. We had a nice chat over on Locals a couple weeks ago. We'll have more. We have the lunar eclipse coming up. I'll devote most of tomorrow's show to the lunar eclipse, by the way, since it'll begin on the 14th and move in on the 15th. So yes, tomorrow will be a lunar eclipse show. Artist here, nice day here in Florida. This is a struggler's mindset or a thriver. I choose thriver. I'm going to put that up there. I love it. Choose thriver. There we go. Soul Traveler, Jonas, the lovely and talented one. Saving Austin one tooth at a time. There's our guy from the Great White North, Neil Smith, in the house. Seeger is taking the tasering instead of coffee. I think that that is a rapid response to one's adrenaline needs, for sure. Tom Jordan in the house. The great Tom Jordan. Privacy anti-scum. Hey, hey, hey. Amy Gill. I'm going to put this right here. Yes, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Please pass it along as well. Zerlith Immortal. Steve, we got to hook up. Let's hook up again. Devin Dewar. She's with us. Devin Dewar is with us. Good morning, Devin. Good to see you. Magic Cat with the ICK. Check out Devin's channel, by the way. Devin Dewar over on YouTube. Mark S. Look at this. Can we get a huzzah for our guy, Mark S? Just completed 8 weeks of a pipeline project in Alberta. And it's not just any 8 weeks. It's 8 weeks in the darkest, coldest time of the year. Hats off to you. I'm going to tip my beanie. Tip my beanie to my guy, Mark. There she is. Lynette Jardine, Mad Maxine, Mary Grether, having a bad morning. Mary, hit those brakes on the bad morning. Hit those brakes and slam that baby into reverse. We're gonna reverse the current here. Liddy Lou, Harriet Bowie, My Endless Road, Barbara Boots, Andrea Garland. We got an Andrea Garland sighting today. How about that? Nice light. Man, Claire's in the house. Ratchet Boo, we are ready to go. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's get into the weather. Here we go. All right. That's it right there, boys and girls. Let me zoom in, make it a little bit bigger. All right. So here we are at the 22nd degree. I should do the weather like a round of golf. Here we are. It's the 22nd degree of Pisces. Sun Saturn conjunction on the green. It looks like it's about a 15-foot putt. Actually, a little bit longer than that. We're in the that's about a 22-foot putt. Can Sun Saturn sink it and put it in the hole? By the way, Bill Murray making the talk show rounds lately. Very interesting. I don't know if he's got a new project or something, but he was on, was it Drew Barrymore, talking about Gene Hackman and his relationship with Gene Hackman. He must have a new movie out. Anyway, let's get into this. So we have the Sun, Saturn. Now, remember yesterday we had Saturn before the Sun. Today, the Sun is in front of Saturn, and that is significant because yesterday we were dealing with this orthodoxy and this, I would say, hierarchical conformity, right? Saturn was sort of the ruler of the day yesterday, but not really in a good way, right? No chart. I don't know why that is. This is, this is something that StreamYard is bugging out with on me, because on mine it's just chart. Let me tee it up for you guys again. So hold on a second. Now I just have to get back to StreamYard. Here we go. Let's try it again. My apologies. The second time in a row that this has happened. Now there it is. You should be seeing it, right? Let me see if I can go back to StreamYard and double up and make sure it's on there. There we go. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, producer Steve. All right, let's go back here to the actual chart. That's right there. Okay, zooming back in. There we go. All right. Yeah, so yesterday it was Saturn leading the pack. And Saturn's about, I mean, you could make a case here, and I'm going to use the Massey versus Trump dust up, that Saturn is either blind allegiance or principle. This to me, it's not just to me, but Trump has become such a iconic figure that in not only just an iconic figure, but wedded to this idea of MAGA and these MAGA principles, whatever they are. America first, I get it, right? Like, we could probably do a whole show on the cosmology of MAGA, but let's be honest here. Like, it is a religion, just like the left have their own version of their religion, which is going to be kind of more socially Marxist and kind of DEI-ish, right? Like, it is a faith-based secular religion that is a kind of a bundled mishmash of a number of different things that give it this, sticky. We'll use the word sticky. That was a word that was used a long time ago back in the internet. This sticky quality to it. And that's very Saturnian, right? It's like, if you don't follow Trump and you don't believe in the vision, or you don't toe the party line, we don't have time for you. Where is this coming from? Well, it's coming from the quote unquote true believers, because I experienced that yesterday over on Twitter on my feed, because I was tweeting about Massey, whom I like. So it was certainly coming through on Twitter, but it was also coming through on a number of attack pieces by people, or from people who are clearly, they're clearly gatekeepers, like DC Drano. It was interesting that Matt Walsh kind of broke with Trump on this, and he was more in the Thomas Massey camp, right? So it was very interesting, but it was that Saturnian sort of principle, like, well, you don't cross the Pope. You just follow what the Pope says. And Trump is the Pope. He is the Pope. He is the pontiff of MAGA. And look, I get it, right? I totally get it. He's the pontiff of MAGA. Now, the upside of that is incredible allegiance and this mesh that holds all these people together, and this belief, this unerring belief in one man and his ability to completely change the course of history and the direction of the country. And to some extent, right, there's a there because he has some pull. right? He has some pull. He has numbers. He has a vociferous group backing him. However, Thomas Massey, maybe not the same numbers, but an equally dogged, and on Massey's side, Saturn becomes principal, right? On Trump's side, Saturn is the high priest, the pontiff, the pope, laying down the catechism for the belief system of his followers. It is a personification of Saturn. For Massey, Saturn is principal, right? Because he is not the pope. He is not the guy who is blessing and ordaining, his followers. So for him, it's principle. And that was the tussle yesterday. It was principle versus the Pope, P versus P. And what was it about? It was the square to Jupiter, which is about spending, right? What was Massey's complaint? He says, "Yeah, I'll vote for this, but we just did this Doge thing, and there's things in the CR that are related to Doge. Take them out." Right? Or include the Doge cuts in the CR. And it's one thing to fire a bunch of government employees. It's another thing to, surgically remove the spending. And this is what Massey was talking about. And then on the other side, it's like, well, you're just being a grandstander. Just shut up, get in line, be a team player, and trust Trump. Trust the plan. We've heard that before. Trust the plan. Now, when you ask somebody who is in that camp, well, what is the plan? What is Trump's plan here? And it's like secured borders, tariffs, right? They can't really articulate the plan. So today the sun is in front of Saturn. Now we have the personality, right? The personality comes to the forefront. Before we had principal Saturn, that's related to Massey, and then we had the Pope or the Pontiff or Magister Ludi, who is Trump, as a representation of Saturn. Today, the sun is in front, so now the personality emerges. And I don't think this thing is done or over. People are going to be talking about it. You're going to have Trump's attack squad go after Massey. It's already happened. And it's all around this budget, right? This Jupiter Gemini, which has been squaring Saturn for a while now. So you would think that they'd had some time to figure this out. We're going to revisit this in March. Well, it's March, and we're still dealing with the Jupiter-Saturn square. And what has been the credo, the mantra? Spend if you need to spend on things, and conserve where you have to. You don't want to overspend. You don't want to overextend yourself with this Jupiter-Saturn square, because there are things that are going to come up, and you're going to need that extra money. I spent $600 yesterday to get more plumbing shit fixed around here. Right. So, luckily, thankfully, I had the extra money to pay for it. And, this is, the United States is like a giant household. And there are going to be things that are going to come up that we need to be able to pay for. And clearly there are things that we've been paying for that have been absolutely ridiculous. So it'll be interesting today to see how this unfolds now that the sun is in front of Saturn. The moon is in Virgo, and we know that the moon in Virgo is tight, right? It is tight. It's kind of, for all you moon in Virgo people, put your fingers in your ears right now. It's a little anal retentive. It's the nature of the moon in Virgo. It's okay, right? The world would be a lesser place without the moon in Virgo. I'm just saying. And today that moon is squaring Uranus. Oh, look at that. Now, By the time we get into this evening and the early morning hours of tomorrow, that moon is going to be trining Uranus. But today, as I speak and as the crow flies, it is in what? Conflict, right? The square is conflict. Moon in Virgo wants to be prudent, wants to be conservative. Uranus and Taurus wants to spend. And so this thing is not over. The debate is not over. We are still in conflict here, at least in this country. For you people in other parts of the world who are not embroiled in this soap opera, there is another version of the Moon Uranus square, right? Which is, you'll hear the lament, lighten up, lighten up. Why do you worry about this? What's the big deal? Just lighten up. Come on, take the stick out of your butt. Just lighten up here. That's the Moon Uranus square. And it's like, oh, am I really that? But on the other side of it too, there's like, hey, fuck you. You don't have to tell me to lighten up. I know what's important for my household. And I'm not going to be forced to do something just because it's cool or trendy or it's sort of the most rebellious option posing as creative. I don't have to do that. And it's a lonely place this morning with the moon in Virgo. And we have this inconjunct with Pluto. And there's a psychological function here with this Pluto inconjunct to the moon. And the psychological function is being tested. Not the function itself, but it's about being tested. There's this thing with Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals. And one of the rules for radicals is to use people's virtue and morality against them. And you'll see this with Thomas Massey. You will see this attack. His virtue and his morality will be used against him. You will see the rules for radicals, which you would think would be the province of the left. They will be applied to Thomas Massey, trust me. And even here, right, today, with this Pluto inconjunct with the moon, is okay, well, if that's what you really believe, well, let's see how much your belief system is going to carry you when it's under intense scrutiny and you and your life and your efforts are being judged against it. And in most cases, people will fall and they will fail when it comes to that. And especially with the moon in Virgo, because there are such ridiculous standards with the moon in Virgo. There's no other option but to admit, well, I'm not perfect. Well, of course you're not perfect. So, maybe you should just reconsider your position. It's like a gotcha moment, which is what we're dealing with here, right? But that's okay, because as the morning and the afternoon hours and the evening hours begin to blend and move into one another, if you hold your position, by this time tomorrow, people are going to tip their cap and they're going to say, you were right. You were right. So today is a bit of a test, right? Can you stand on principle? And can you stand on principle in a way where you are not brittle? Because that, usually when that happens, a person becomes quite brittle. So can you stand on principle and also be flexible? That, I think, is really sort of the message for today. Because we all have something that, is really important to us, whether it's immediate and in the moment or big picture, long term. But we all have our sacred cows that we invest in. But today, the sacred cow is being challenged. And can you stand there in the face of that and kind of admit, yeah, I'm not perfect, but I'm also not necessarily going to just bow and succumb to some kind of pressure because my morality or my principles are being used against me. It's the oldest trick in the book. Nobody can ever live up to those kinds of standards. Theoretically, there was only one, and he was crucified, right? This is kind of the territory that we're in right now. I do like the fact that Mars is moving forward. Here we go, 18 degrees. We got that Sun, Saturn, Mars trine. So I do think this idea of being conservative and conserving resources is going to be the way to go, right? It is the path that has the most flow. So whether it's Massey and Trump or your own life, right? Continue to sort of hold that line. Mars in Cancer is conservative, and there's a rising tide around this idea. People are tired, right? So there's a couple of versions of this idea of being conservative. One is fiscally conservative in the budget, which is really where Massey is coming from, right? The other conservative piece is the philosophy or sort of the moral principle of being conservative. Like you believe in marriage, you believe in family, you don't believe in abortion, right? These are, sort of hardcore conservative principles. Your word is your bond. That is a conservative principle, right? Your word is your bond. And when you say something, you carry through and you follow through. These are very primary functions of this idea of being conservative. And really, this Mars trine the Sun and Saturn promotes that. So it's okay to move your life and your energy in that direction. There's nothing, the astrology supports it. Doesn't mean that you won't get blowback or pushback, because you will, right? You got Mercury scoring Mars. People may not like it. There's a very aggressive energy in the air today. Even though it's a wide square, it's a square, nonetheless, very aggressive energy. We talked about it yesterday. So be prepared. If you're going to stand on principle, be prepared to deal with that energy. Mars has that nice sextile with Uranus, and that can be very innovative. It's so funny. It's kind of like, well, if you practice like conservative principles, whatever they are, fiscally, monetarily, morally, but even like with your property and your resources, it doesn't mean that you're a cave dweller or you're wearing a hair shirt, or you're hanging out with the Amish, which may not necessarily be a bad idea. You can still innovate, right? Even when there's limitations, you can still have innovation. And that's really what we're talking about here. And the more that Mars moves forward, right, 18, 19, 20 degrees, that sextile with Uranus, that's innovation through limitation. So one of the things, and we're gonna kind of end on this. One of the things that will happen here is that not only, if you're going to stand on principle, not only will you have to demonstrate it, but, well, here, hold on a second. Not only will you have to ground that and dig your heels in, line in the sand, also manage to be somewhat flexible. You also have the ability to be innovative in that. It's like, well, Thomas Massey doesn't have a solution. Well, it's not his job. His job, he's a limiter, right? Thomas Massey's a limiter. He's like the fuel filter on your engine. He's there to limit what goes into your engine. He's not a creator. He's a limiter. However, with this, he is very innovative in his home, right? So this Mars sextile with Uranus does allow you to be innovative. So yes, you can demonstrate the change that you want to be. You can demonstrate it. It's like, okay, let me do this. You want a solution? I'll give you a solution. I'll demonstrate that solution. And of course, always with a sextile, it is the call to act. All right, let's get into our True Hemp Science star of the day. Let's do that. And again, for all of you folks who are just joining the show, welcome. Your presence here is appreciated. You can always hit the like, subscribe. If you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee, the link is in there for everybody that's purchased me a coffee. I thank you for that. Okay, let's do the True Hemp Science star of the day. Okay, let me make sure I got it. Let me go back to StreamYard. Yes, indeed. All right, we got it. So we are talking about True Hemp Science and the power of CBD. And of course, anything that you spend over $100, you type in 15MINS and you will get the goodie bag, the goodie bag. And you will enjoy the goodie bag. It's like the Whitman sampler of CBD inside of your order. $150 more, get you free shipping. There's always a 30-day money-back guarantee from our guy, Chris, at truehempscience.com. And know that when you purchase his product, part of that money is going to the SB3 Defense Fund to keep these doors of the CBD purveyors and growers open here in the state of Texas. So your purchase is also in some ways a political contribution as well. Okay, let's talk about Jack Kerouac. Hey, Jack Kerouac. Jack Kerouac is one of the most important figures in American culture and American writing. He is a seminal figure in that there are very few people. I'm just giving you sort of the cultural background. There are very few people whose work defines an era. Whatever you think of, I have some in my eye. Oh, all right. Whatever you, man. Okay. Whatever you think of Jack Kerouac and his writing, he becomes the voice of a generation. And of course, we're talking about the beat generation. And I'm not sure how many more authors, have, like, you could go into the 60s and, you have Thomas Wolfe, who, author of The Right Stuff and the Ken Kesey book and a number of other interesting sort of forays between journalism and writing. You have Hunter S. Thompson and sort of the gonzo journalist style, which begins to kind of play a role in terms of criticism and exploding the journalistic voice in some ways. But none of them really hold a candle to Kerouac. And it's because there's this restless nature to Kerouac and his entire generation. And let's get into it. Let's take a look at this chart. First and foremost, you can kind of see, even though there aren't many color pictures of Jack Kerouac, so you get a lot of black and white, but even still, you can kind of see the painted effect of the Piscean eyes, right? The eyes are almost watercolory. They're kind of watercolory, and you get that with Pisces. You'll always get that with Pisces. Almost always. So we can see from a physical standpoint, he has that. Even with the black and white photo, he's got a very weird relationship with his mother. So let's talk about that Virgo moon again, and it's right on the ascendant. Jack Kerouac lived with his mother, and in fact, his mother outlived him. He purchased 3 homes because of the amount of money he made off of On the Road and Dharma Bums and related sorts of projects and royalties, right? So Kerouac did okay financially, and he lived with his mother his entire life. It's like weird. And his mother was a huge, huge influence on him. Now, when he was young, he lost an older brother. I guess, back in the day, they would have like, scarlet fever and shit like that. So his brother died when he was about 4 or 5 years old. And his brother was 9, and it made a huge impact on Kerouac's life. And I think in some ways we can see this with this Mars Pluto in conjunct, and Mars in the fourth house. So the Mars part here, particularly Sagittarius, is the restlessness. But Kerouac talks about his, I wouldn't say he was haunted by his brother's spirit. He called his brother his guardian angel. And when you read some of Kerouac's pieces and interviews, you come away with this idea of somebody who is deeply spiritual. Like, he's a deeply spiritual person. He's incredibly flawed, right? Helped cover up a murder. That's a whole other part of, we can get into that eighth house with the cover up of the murder in Chiron and the South Node in Aries. Married 3 times, but also kind of a secret homosexual. Again, Chiron and Aries, South Node in Aries. That's men right there, by the way, right? Certain men, Neil Cassidy, were his weakness. He's a very complex character and figure, because when you read some of his writing, or just he had a very mystical relationship with reality. I mean, it comes through in his interviews and his commentary. Dharma Bums was his treatise in a lot of ways on Buddhism in America. He was hanging out with the poet Gary Snyder. And after he wrote the book, he was expecting the guy who was the head of the Zen order in America, or the leading Zen mind, was D.T. Suzuki. And D.T. Suzuki just trashed his book. And for Kerouac, it was quite painful, in as much as he was a rebellious sort, which he was. It was very painful. But it's not just that, it's the idea that he would explore these ideas of mysticism through his work. And he was a devout Catholic. So he's a very kind of paradoxical and ironic figure for a generation. Now, one of the things that Kerouac was noted for was his writing style, which was free associative. So let's take a look at that. Okay, we have Mercury over here, and he's got Mercury in Pisces. It's early Pisces, right? This guy, man, it's bad. Hold on a second. My eyes are bad this morning. Late Aqua, my bad. Late Aqua. He's got Mercury, late Aqua. What's it doing? It's trining Jupiter. It's trining his true node. It's trining Pallas, but really trining Jupiter. That's the big trine. And how does he write? Right? Like, he would get pieces of tracing paper and then tape them together and have them as part of a continuous roll on his typewriter. And that's how he would write. So he would get into this kind of free associative sort of state. And according to people that knew Kerouac, when he would start to write, all these things had been worked out previously. Like, he had a map. And you can see this with Mercury in the 6th house. This is, Mercury becomes very functional over here in the 6th house. So you had a map with how to get to where he was going. And people thought, well, he was just writing off the cuff. Not really. Back then people kept journals, and he was a big journal keeper, and so a lot of On the Road was an amalgamation of his journal entries. He wasn't looking at a piece of paper; they're already in his head, right? This is kind of a Piscean trick, and that's how he was able to do it. Plus, he was fueled with copious amounts of Benzedrine, coffee, soup, whatever his wife at the time was feeding him in order for him to stay up for 72 hours straight and write this thing, which is really kind of what happened. And it sets the tone in a lot of ways for a generation that is influenced heavily by people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and the whole bebop era, which is about improvisation, right? So Kerouac is really inspired. God, got a runny nose right now. Really inspired by these people, but again, he's a whack job, right? He's a total whack job, and he's an extreme character, an extreme personality. In a lot of ways, Jack Kerouac is ahead of his time. He talks about he dropped out of college. He dropped out of college because, well, first of all, I didn't know this about him, but he was an athlete. He played football. He actually got a scholarship. He got a scholarship to Columbia to play football. And he suffered a knee injury, which eventually kept him from being on the team and basically got him out of college. So, I mean, I think that's South Node and Aries territory. Tapping into the warrior, tapping into the athlete, trying that Mars and Sag, trying, Mars, Neptune, which is highly creative. But while he was in college, he said, I can't believe it. All these professors talked about was Marx, Marx, Marx. I am not a Marxist. I am a Catholic. Like, he would identify as a Catholic for the entirety of his life, right? Like, that was his thing. I'm a Catholic and I'm an American and I'm a disaffected, restless, wandering soul. And he's a complex character. He's got this Mars-Uranus square. He's rebellious. He's very rebellious. And yet, it's that rebellion. I think you could probably pick like 3 people from the 1950s who become sort of the face of this, new wave of America. And one is Jack Kerouac. The other would be James Dean, cinematically. And the third would be Elvis. Like, these are the 3 faces of rebellion in the arts. Jack Kerouac in the written word, James Dean cinematically, and Elvis Presley musically. So he's a singular figure. And what's also interesting about his chart is the 7th house. He's married 3 times. Like, you would think that after the 2nd time, he'd be like, oh, this isn't for me. Let me go sleep with Neil Cassidy again. But he continues to go back to this idea of marriage. And I think, it's the 7th house. And he's looking for partners. He's looking for people who can sort of help midwife his work, which his first wife did with On the Road. She basically fed him all of his drug cocktails and soup or whatever that was going to keep him, working and burning for 72 hours straight, which is really how he did On the Road. So the 7th house is an interesting place for Kerouac, but it's not easy because he always has to deal with the limitations that are inherent, that being the Saturn-Venus opposition. And at times, this idea of marriage and partnership sort of weighing him down. But again, he kind of has to go there. True node in Libra, conjunct Saturn, Saturn in Libra, exalted relationship. And it's all very foundational with the second house. These marriages and these partnerships, whether they're male or female, they all sort of perform this role as like a creative midwife for Kerouac. Whatever you think of his work, whatever you think of his prose, a lot of people look at it now and go, "Oh, that's really outdated." The language feels very forced in some ways, but that wasn't the case back then. And Jack Kerouac was a celebrated figure on the cover of Time magazine. And, there's this guy, what's his name? I think it was Hubert Hunk, Huncke, I think that's his name. And he was this hustler that lived in Times Square. And he was the one that came up with the name Beat Generation. And Kerouac was friends with this guy. And this guy, Herbert Hunk, actually, I think, wound up going to prison for the cover-up of this murder that Kerouac was also kind of privy to. Kerouac didn't kill somebody, but there was a guy who was killed, and Kerouac was, both he and William Burroughs were involved, and they were both convicted of tampering with evidence. This guy was, strange blurring of lines, kind of predatory homosexuality. And what happened is the guy who killed this guy, who was theoretically this predatory homosexual, probably had sex with him. And he couldn't live with himself. And so he killed the dude. It was kind of a big scandal. It was right at the beginning of this whole beat thing. So this Herbert Hunk guy is one of the guys who winds up going to prison as a result of these weird machinations around this murder. And again, it's very eighth housey for Kerouac, right? So Hunk talks about, well, I just feel beat like an old shoe. I feel beat like an old shoe. And so that became sort of the moniker. Kerouac took that. He said, "Oh, beat, that's interesting. Yeah, that describes us. We're beat." So it becomes the beats, right? The beat. It beats for ultimately beatnik. But that's where the Nick part comes after the beat part, in case you were wondering how they got the name. So there you go. Your True Hemp Science star of the day. Hey, Jack Kerouac. One of the major modern literary influences of our time. And decidedly American. Even though, an interesting little factoid about Jack Kerouac's family was French. And I think they came from Canada and settled in Lowell, Massachusetts. And he spoke French up until he could still speak French. He learned how to speak English in grade school. So French is actually Jack Kerouac's first language. And I think it's interesting because when I think of French, it's a language that's very imagistic. Like there's a word in French that is translated into like feeling disgusted, but the power that it packs is way more than the sort of English definition of disgusted. And there's also kind of an interesting flow to the French language, right? And that was Kerouac's primary language when he was young. And I think in some ways, one could make a case if you wanted to do like a thesis on the French language and how it influenced Kerouac's writing style and stream of consciousness. You could probably, I'm sure somebody already has, but you could do that. That's thesis. That would be thesis related material. All right. I'm out of here. Come join us over on 15. We will talk more about the Trump Massey affair and I'll give you the latest pulse on how America is feeling about it. For all you people out there who are not American, you say, well, I can give two shits about that. I don't blame you. It is a soap opera that even here in this country, we could probably do without. However, with Donald Trump, the new Caesar, who I've been talking about as the new Caesar for a long time now, drama is almost nearly unavoidable. So we wind up talking about it and dealing with it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a blessed day. Treat each other well. God bless you all. Love you all. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. And tomorrow we will talk less about the weather and more about the eclipse. So please join us. Okay. Take care. Bye for now.